Why did you drop off the face of the earth? Good question. Hey, I'm Jordan. Do we still do intros like on YouTube? I don't even know. Obviously, it's been a minute since I've made a video, but I am here to answer the questions that you guys submitted about post-PhD life, during PhD life, what I'm up to next, the current state of AI, and what I'm thinking about talking about on the channel this year. These are largely pulled from both the comments on my last video as well as from Instagram. So thank you for everyone who submitted a comment, and let's get into that first question of why did I drop off the face of the earth starting in, I think, around November of last year. So as I'll talk about a little later, PhDs are hard and take up a lot of your time. I was getting into dissertation mode, I was doing a lot of writing, I was finalizing results, but it got to the point where I didn't feel like I had the bandwidth to make well-researched content that would be useful to all of you and that I would feel like good about putting up on the channel. So that's half the reason why I kind of dropped off social media. The other half was actually that I wasn't really sure what to talk about and what I wanted to talk about. And so I did actually try to make some videos and I'd watch them back and it was just kind of me rambling, but not like in any particular direction. And between that and just not having a ton of time, I decided that it would be better to ghost all of you. So sorry about that, because I also probably should have anticipated, at least on the grad school side, that I wouldn't have a ton of time. And that gets into the next question that came up a lot, which was essentially a combination of what do I wish I knew before I started my PhD? And is doing a PhD worth it right now? I'm actually going to start with the second question. I partially answered this in a YouTube short / Instagram reel a few days before this video is going up. In 2026, I have very odd feelings about recommending that people do PhDs. The US is in a weird place when it comes to academia, when it comes to scientific research, when it comes to like the public sector versus the private sector. And particularly if you're someone who's interested in anything in the AI space, I wouldn't say like never do a PhD, but I am inclined to say maybe like wait out the next year or two and keep an eye on the landscape before committing to something that's going to take like 6 to 8 years of your life. However, if you were to ask me, would I go back in time and do the PhD all over again? I think my answer would generally be yes, but there are things that I would do differently. And the main one is that I would learn how to be a better manager. I think that it's one of the underrated parts of doing a PhD in the sense that you go in and you're fresh out of college, for me, 22. I think a lot of people come into PhDs with these like lofty goals about the kind of research you're going to do. And particularly if you're going to a place like MIT, I think it's also easy to like put your advisors on pedestals. But similar to a lot of like normal, non-academic jobs, a lot of your PhD is actually doing a good amount of managing up. And I don't think I was very good at that until probably the last like 2 years of my PhD, when I essentially realized that in order to finish, a lot of the work was not going to be the research. It was going to be wrangling people and handling admin and getting paperwork signed and things like that. So that's a big one. I think I would have still gone through the program that I did, which is the Harvard MIT Health Sciences Technology program. But the nature of my program is very loose because we don't really have a strong home department and we can work with like anyone with a Harvard or MIT affiliation. And that adds to that managing up and managing kind of out side of things, because while the lack of structure is nice in that it lets you do a lot of things that you just wouldn't normally be able to do in a PhD, it also means that you're a little bit more untethered and you have to do a lot more like wrangling of people and finding the right people to help you through the entire process. I don't think you come out of undergrad knowing how to be a good manager, particularly if you're managing up and not managing down. And I suspect that for a lot of people, and I've heard this from other people in my cohort and at MIT, that in hindsight, that is definitely one of the big things that they wish that they had known. But eventually I did learn how to be a halfway decent manager, which for me is also particularly important due to like the ADHD and the autism, as someone who largely works from home and now largely works for herself, which gets into another question that a lot of you asked, which was essentially, am I going into academia, industry, government, or content full time? I'm not going into academia, at least not right now. That was never really the plan for me, to be fair. And a lot of that just comes down to the pace at which research happens in academia. I'm someone who I think likes doing kind of 2 or 3 year sprints on specific big projects and then being able to hand them off or transition to new projects, new ideas, and I think academia makes that a little bit hard. So for the time being, I essentially have 3 jobs. One big chunk is working for a company called Andis Labs. They are an AI consulting startup, I guess you could say, in New York City. I'm still in Boston. And I'm doing essentially a lot of internal product development in the AI agent space for them, which has been a lot of fun. I spent like six-ish month last year, essentially being like a back-end engineer for another startup who was interested in AI agent work. Separate from Andis, I run my own essentially consulting practice, working with generally businesses in the Boston area to do AI adoption trainings and AI strategy advising. For me, a lot of what that looks like is being very skeptical about how people are approaching AI adoption and essentially creating a sandbox for people to play in when it comes to tools that the company is potentially interested in developing. Of course, I'm obviously still doing content, I'm doing speaking. When it comes to you guys, which some of you will already know because you've already participated, I am running live courses around talking about our relationships with AI, our concerns about AI. The course is typically called AI IRL, How to Live With or Without It. I've met several of you through that, and that's been very, very fun. We usually spend 8 to 12 weeks together going over different themes and topics that are either timely because something recently happened in the AI space or just things that you're dealing with like personally. It becomes a space where people can feel comfortable having, I think, more complicated feelings about their relationships with AI and get support on how to kind of navigate and negotiate that in the real world. So I'll actually be running that later this year. If you are interested, I'll drop like a waitlist link in the description. And then I've also actually met some of you through one-on-one work. Sometimes it's helping people with technical implementations. Sometimes it's helping people with what I call AI clarity, which essentially means that you're just like overwhelmed with the current state of things. And so we spend an hour together working through things, and you leave with a clearer plan on what AI is going to look like for you, whether that be at work, tools that you are interested in using, tools that you're going to stop using, how you're going to think about ethics and climate and creative use, and how you can have interesting conversations about it going forward. Info about all of this will be in the description in case you're interested, but that is the short term. If that sounds all over the place, that's a little bit intentional, partially because I wanted to like take a step back from making any like serious kind of long-term career decisions after the PhD, but also because I think the question of what do you do after a PhD is shifting a little bit as AI continues to develop and kind of infiltrate most white-collar industries, which gets us to how am I feeling about AI these days? To some extent, I'm actually feeling better about it than I used to be, which might seem counterintuitive given all of the news about hacks and rogue agents and, Anthropic destroying books and all of the wrongful death lawsuits and things like that. But I started this channel in 2018 where people weren't really having conversations about the practical implications of AI, as well as how to navigate these kinds of problems and how to negotiate your relationship with AI, both on an individual level at work, but also when it comes to things like data center development, how that intersects with like zoning policy. And so I think over the last year, I've seen a lot more interest and engagement with those things, and that makes me hopeful that the commons will start to shape the direction that this kind of stuff goes in more than it used to. At the same time, I think that because the discourse around AI gets so polarizing, it's very easy for people who are, super pro-AI, people who are super anti-AI, particularly in the social media landscape, to start yelling at each other instead of using the levers that you can actually pull to make changes, particularly for people who are actually very anti-AI. I worry that anti-AI is causing people to not engage with the topic at all and see like any sort of engagement with the topic as like essentially being like complicit and evangelizing. And if you want to shape how AI is going to look in your life and in the world, you do kind of have to engage with it to some level so that you know what you can do to shape that future. That's something that I factor in when it comes to my own AI usage. I could get into my setup if you would like. If you would be interested in that, leave a comment, which leads into, is AI taking jobs and am I worried about the AI bubble? This is one of those things that I think is more of a people thing than an AI thing. We're actually seeing some of this in the kind of business reporting on AI in the workplace, where there's a lot of like top down, like we have to do more AI at companies. And then people will lay off staff in order to do that for like productivity or whatever. And what they find is that there's no like usage policy. There isn't actually like a structured plan of like, what does we want to do more AI mean in the company? And so we're starting to see a little bit of rehiring as companies realize that their efforts to, be AI first aren't really working. At the same time, the current business reporting does say that heavy AI investment is projected to continue to increase. But I do think that one of the things that's going to impact that is the quote unquote AI bubble. I do think that there's a bubble, but not, I think, in the way that people usually refer to it. OpenAI as a company is like incredibly over leveraged to an absolutely insane point. But VC investment is not grounded in like the free market and market trends. It's grounded in them being a little bit AI pilled. But I don't know how long that will even be sustainable when it comes to these companies, particularly in the context of data center development. And what I mean by that is not the like how expensive it is, but the fact that unlike a lot of other infrastructure development, the contents, the actual like tech in data centers are going to need to be replaced like every like 2 years as, chips advance, as things become more efficient. And so you spend like 2 years building this giant thing and spending like 50 million or $100 million on it, only to have to revamp the entire thing again as your models get bigger and as the tech improves. And I think that that's going to also become a bit of a factor in what happens with this bubble, which gets into the last question, essentially, which is, what do I want to talk about this year? The first part of that answer is tell me what you want me to talk about this year so that I have more ideas. The second is that this channel started very technical, and it has shifted over time to be kind of a mix of technical and then people stuff, what I'm calling negotiating AI. I want to go back to straddling this a little bit more, still doing some of the technical content, getting into how certain new models work, potentially talking about interesting research in the space. I also want to do more essentially product roasts. If you follow me on Substack, I actually do that a bit over there, where when I see an AI product or feature launch that I just think is like stupid, I will talk about it and I will talk about why. But I do also want to continue talking about the people stuff. I'd like to do probably more interview-based content these days. I'm not a journalist, obviously, but there's a lot of interesting on-the-ground work going on that I would love to cover and just have more interesting conversations with people. And then I'd like to do some, lighter and probably lower stakes stuff. I'll probably bring back the BookTube channel infrequently. You actually might be watching this video on the BookTube channel because I've cross-posted it. But I think that so much of my work, particularly in the people side, is kind of crashing out about like serious and impactful topics. And sometimes I also want to crash out about things that just like are a little bit less serious. Like my best friend is getting married this summer, and we have a wedding party group chat with like 24 people. And guess what color the messages are? They're green. Because 7 people in this group chat have Androids and everyone else has iPhones, which means that every time people react to a message, you get a notification that's like, so-and-so reacted heart to this message. And so as we get closer to the wedding, there's more and more messages. And half the time I pick up my phone and I have like 48 new text messages where 6 of them are actual messages and 42 of them are 7 people reacting to all 6. And of course, I can hear all of you who have Android phones disagreeing with me right now. So if you would like to hear the opposite argued, that actually iPhones should be abolished because they discriminate against people who send green texts, comedian Millie Tamirez actually argues that on the latest season of Abolish Everything. Abolish Everything is a debate show where comedians argue that their pet peeves should be wiped off of society entirely, and when season 2 came out, I binged the entire thing in a day. In fact, if you've ever wanted to see some of your favorite Nebula creators make very low stakes but extremely passionate cases alongside professional comedians, Season 2 is definitely for you, and it's only available on Nebula. Nebula is home to a ton of creative, entertaining, and thoughtful content made by creators who are passionate about their craft. And Abolish Everything is just one corner of Nebula. In fact, if you'd actually like to continue crashing out about AI with other creators, we have a whole banner for that right now from people like Tom Nichols, LostYouTube, Lily Alexandre, and me once I start getting back into a rhythm. So whether you want to argue that no one should ever send a text that just says hi, which is correct, that is insane behavior, or dig into how AI is reshaping journalism, there is something on Nebula for you. If you want to watch Abolish Everything alongside a ton of other Nebula originals and exclusives, you can sign up using my link to get 50% off. That's just $30 a year or $250 a month. So click on the link in the description, scan the QR code, or go to nebula.tv/Jordan. with whatever device you happen to be using to start watching now. Otherwise, the plan is to put out like 2 videos a month. It'll probably be every other week on Fridays, but absolutely zero promises as I get back into things. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more of my day-to-day stuff, then head over to Instagram and Substack. And otherwise, I will see y'all in approximately 2 weeks. Bye.